Ukraine's largest ammunition depot is gone. Not damaged, not partially destroyed, completely obliterated. A single Russian strike eliminated what military analysts are calling the most critical weapons storage facility in the entire Ukrainian arsenal. And the weapon that did it traveled so fast and maneuvered so unpredictably that every air defense system Ukraine threw at it simply failed. Welcome to Legal Lens USA. I am your host, David Reynolds. What you are about to hear will completely change how you understand the current state of this conflict and the technology that is reshaping modern warfare. The next 14 minutes will reveal information that mainstream outlets are either ignoring or deliberately downplaying because it contradicts the narrative they have been selling for 2 years. Before we go any further, if you are new here, hit that like button and subscribe right now because we cover stories like this before anyone else does, and we break them down in a way that actually makes sense. This is not just another ammunition depot getting hit. This is the revelation that Russia has demonstrated a capability that fundamentally alters the strategic calculus of this entire war. Deep in western Ukraine, far behind what was supposed to be secure territory protected by multiple layers of NATO-supplied air defense systems, sat the Khmelnytsky ammunition complex. This was not some minor storage bunker. This facility sprawled across dozens of acres, constructed during the Soviet era, with the kind of hardened engineering designed to survive nuclear near misses. Reinforced concrete walls several meters thick, underground storage chambers built into solid bedrock, separated magazines designed so that even if one section detonated, the others would remain intact. Ukrainian military planners had spent 2 years stockpiling Western-supplied ammunition at this location, precisely because they believed it was untouchable. The facility sat more than 500 kilometers from the nearest Russian-controlled territory. Ukrainian air defense batteries ringed the region. Patriot systems provided by the United States. Iris-T launchers from Germany. NASAMS platforms that were supposed to create an impenetrable umbrella over critical infrastructure. Every intelligence assessment, every military briefing, every operational plan assumed that this depot was secure. The weapons stored there represented months of Western military aid. Artillery shells that cost hundreds of dollars each. Precision-guided munitions worth tens of thousands, anti-tank missiles, air defense interceptors. The replacement value of what sat inside those bunkers exceeded several $billion. And on a Tuesday morning that will be studied in military academies for decades, Russian forces sent a weapon straight through all of it. Eyewitnesses across 3 provinces reported seeing something in the sky moving at impossible speeds. Not the familiar arc of a ballistic missile that air defense operators train to intercept. Not the cruise missile flight profile that radar systems are designed to track. Something different. Something that defied the assumptions built into every defensive system Ukraine possessed. The explosion that followed was not a single detonation. It was a cascading series of blasts that continued for more than 18 hours as stored munitions cooked off in a chain reaction that turned the entire facility into what one Ukrainian officer described as hell on earth. Satellite imagery captured before Ukrainian authorities restricted access showed a crater complex spanning hundreds of meters. Secondary explosions sent debris kilometers into the surrounding countryside. The seismic signature registered on monitoring stations across Europe. Independent analysts comparing before and after satellite photos confirmed what Russian military officials announced within hours. The Khmelnytsky complex, the single most important ammunition storage facility supporting Ukrainian operations across the southern front, ceased to exist as a functional military asset. Ukrainian air defense commanders immediately launched investigations, trying to understand what happened. How did Russian forces locate a facility whose precise coordinates were among Ukraine's most closely guarded secrets? How did a weapon penetrate airspace that multiple NATO standard systems were actively defending? And most critically, what exactly was the weapon that accomplished what should have been impossible? The weapon responsible for this strike is called the Kinzhal. That name translates to dagger in English, and Russian military planners chose it deliberately. The Kinzhal represents Russia's operational hypersonic air-launched ballistic missile system. And understanding what makes this weapon different from conventional alternatives is essential to grasping why this strike matters so much. Most missiles, the kind that have dominated warfare for 70 years, follow predictable physics. A ballistic missile launches, follows a parabolic arc determined by its initial trajectory, and descends toward its target along a path that radar systems can calculate and interceptors can meet. Cruise missiles fly at lower altitudes using terrain-following profiles, but they still move at subsonic or low supersonic speeds that give defenders time to detect, track, and engage. Air defense networks are built around these assumptions. Radar systems sweep the sky looking for these predicted flight profiles. Computer systems calculate intercept solutions based on ballistic physics. Operators train to engage threats that behave according to established parameters. The Kinzhal does none of that. This weapon launches from a modified MiG-31K interceptor, flying at high altitude and extreme speed. The moment it releases, the Kinzhal accelerates to velocities exceeding Mach 10. That translates to more than 12,000 kilometers per hour under operational conditions. At that speed, a weapon launched from Russian airspace can reach targets 500 kilometers away in under 3 minutes. 3 minutes from launch to impact. But raw speed represents only part of what makes the Kinzhal so problematic for defenders. The critical innovation lies in its ability to maneuver throughout its flight profile. Traditional ballistic missiles become ballistic, meaning they follow a purely gravitational arc once their engines cut off. The Kinzhal maintains control surfaces and propulsion throughout its terminal phase, allowing it to execute evasive maneuvers while traveling at hypersonic velocities. Imagine trying to intercept a target moving faster than a rifle bullet that can also dodge. That is what Ukrainian air defense operators faced. The technical challenges involved in building such a weapon are extraordinary. Maintaining structural integrity while maneuvering at Mach 10 creates forces that would tear apart conventional missile designs. The temperatures generated by atmospheric friction at those speeds exceed 2,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt steel. The guidance systems must function despite those temperatures, and the plasma sheath that forms around hypersonic vehicles, which normally disrupts radio communications. Russian engineers solved these problems through innovations in heat-resistant materials, inertial navigation systems that do not require continuous external communication, and structural designs that can withstand forces that would destroy conventional weapons. According to Russian military statements, the Kinzhal can carry either conventional or nuclear warheads weighing up to 500 kilograms. It can strike both stationary and moving targets. And critically for this discussion, it can defeat air defense systems by simply arriving faster than those systems can complete their engagement cycles. According to Ukrainian military sources and statements from defense officials speaking on background to Western journalists, the Kinzhal strike on Khmelnytsky represented something Ukrainian forces had feared but hoped would never materialize. Multiple air defense systems detected the launch. Patriot batteries went active. Iris-T launchers oriented toward the threat. Operators executed their engagement protocols exactly as trained. And every interceptor fired arrived at empty airspace, because the Kinzhal had already maneuvered away from predicted intercept points. Ukrainian sources reported that at least 6 interceptors were expended attempting to stop this single weapon. 6 missiles, each costing millions of dollars, each representing finite inventory that cannot be quickly replaced, all failed to prevent the strike. Video footage posted to Ukrainian military channels showed air defense systems firing, validating that defensive assets were present and active. But presence does not equal effectiveness. The Kinzhal simply moved through the engagement envelope faster than the defensive cycle could complete. Now here is where this story takes a turn that should alarm every military planner in NATO. It was not Ukrainian officials who confirmed the essential unstoppability of hypersonic weapons against current air defense architectures. It was Western defense contractors. Executives from Raytheon, the American company that manufactures Patriot interceptors, have stated publicly that hypersonic threats represent a challenge that existing systems were not designed to address. They warned that intercepting maneuvering hypersonic weapons requires fundamentally new technologies still years away from deployment. Let that register for a moment. The companies that build the very systems Ukraine is using to defend its critical infrastructure are telling anyone who will listen that those systems cannot reliably stop the weapons Russia is now deploying operationally. Analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies published research concluding that hypersonic glide vehicles and maneuvering ballistic missiles present near-term threats that current missile defense systems will struggle to defeat. Their assessment noted that the speed and maneuverability of these weapons compresses decision timelines to the point where human operators cannot effectively intervene, and even automated systems face fundamental physics limitations. These are not Russian propaganda outlets making these claims. These are American defense institutions and contractors acknowledging a capability gap that tilts the tactical balance in Russia's favor for strikes against high-value stationary targets. So where does this leave the strategic situation? It leaves Ukraine facing a problem with no immediate solution. The entire premise of Western military support has been that NATO air defense systems would protect critical infrastructure, allowing Ukraine to mass forces for offensive operations without fear that rear-area logistics would collapse. The Kinzhal strike on Khmelnytsky directly attacks that assumption. If Russia can eliminate ammunition depots, fuel storage facilities, command centers, and transportation hubs faster than Ukraine can defend them, then the operational sustainability of Ukrainian forces becomes questionable, regardless of how much aid Western nations provide. What does this mean strategically? This is where the story goes from concerning to genuinely alarming. Ukraine operates with extended supply lines running from Polish and Romanian borders to frontline positions hundreds of kilometers away. Those supply lines depend on rail junctions, highway intersections, and storage facilities that must remain functional for the logistics system to work. Every one of those nodes now exists under a threat that Ukrainian air defenses have demonstrated they cannot reliably counter. Russian military planners understand this. The Khmelnytsky strike was not random. It was a demonstration, a message delivered in several $billion worth of destroyed Western ammunition. The message states clearly that Russia possesses both the intelligence capability to locate Ukraine's most critical logistics nodes and the strike capability to eliminate them despite NATO air defenses. Implementing defenses capable of addressing hypersonic threats would require technologies that do not yet exist in deployable form. Directed energy weapons that can engage targets at hypersonic speeds remain experimental. Advanced interceptor designs optimized for hypersonic threats are still in development and testing phases. Even if funding were unlimited, fielding effective defenses would take years. And in the meantime, every critical facility across Ukraine sits vulnerable to weapons that travel faster than the defensive cycle can complete. You cannot solve this problem overnight. You cannot rush physics. And while Western defense contractors work on theoretical solutions, Russia is using operational weapons to systematically dismantle Ukraine's ability to sustain military operations. The implications extend beyond Ukraine's borders. American military bases across Eastern Europe now operate with the knowledge that Russia has demonstrated a capability to strike hardened targets through NATO standard air defenses. The Redzikovo Air Defense Base in Poland, the Mihail Kogalniceanu base in Romania, the logistics hubs in Germany that funnel supplies eastward, all exist within range of weapons that have now proven they can defeat the very systems those bases employ for self-protection. That changes risk calculations. That changes force protection requirements. That changes what it means to position American military assets within range of Russian hypersonic systems. NATO military planners are right now conducting assessments of what the Khmelnytsky strike reveals about vulnerability of alliance infrastructure. Those assessments are not producing comforting conclusions. The strategic balance in Eastern Europe operated for 2 years on the assumption that Western air defenses created sanctuary spaces where Ukraine could organize, resupply, and prepare operations without fear of devastating Russian strikes. That assumption died in 18 hours of cascading explosions at a facility that was supposed to be untouchable. Every ammunition depot, every fuel storage farm, every major rail junction across Ukraine now represents a target that Russia has demonstrated it can eliminate if it chooses to expend the resources. The only question becomes target prioritization and weapon inventory, not feasibility. According to Western military officials speaking to defense journalists, the United States and European allies moved quickly to dispute the scale of destruction, suggesting that while the facility was struck, damage was less catastrophic than Russian claims indicated. Ukrainian officials initially downplayed the significance, stating that ammunition reserves remained adequate and that operations would continue without disruption. Pentagon briefers emphasized that a single strike, however successful, does not determine the outcome of extended conflicts, and that Ukraine retains substantial defensive capabilities. The conflicting narratives, Russia claiming complete facility destruction and the West describing limited damage, created the predictable information space confusion that accompanies every significant military development in this war. For many observers, the mere fact that Russia successfully struck a facility more than 500 kilometers from the front line through multiple air defense layers, using a weapon system that Ukrainian forces could not intercept, represented a concerning development, regardless of the precise damage assessment. The strategic significance derives not from the specific tonnage of ammunition destroyed, but from the demonstration that Russia possesses operational capability to eliminate critical logistics infrastructure despite NATO defensive systems. In the absence of independent verification of damage estimates, the truth of the strike's effectiveness remains contested terrain between competing official narratives. But the fact that Ukrainian forces expended multiple interceptors attempting to stop a weapon that clearly reached its target speaks more loudly than any official statement. Whether further evidence will emerge, providing definitive damage assessment, remains uncertain, but the operational reality that hypersonic weapons can penetrate current air defense architectures has already reshaped strategic planning across both Eastern European and Western military establishments. So where does this leave us? It leaves us at a moment where one weapon, one strike, has fundamentally shifted the conversation about logistics, security, air defense effectiveness, and the strategic balance in this conflict. The largest ammunition depot in Ukraine is gone. Multiple interceptor missiles failed to prevent the strike. Western defense contractors have publicly acknowledged that their systems were not designed to counter the threat these weapons represent, and NATO military planners across Eastern Europe are now reassessing every assumption about sanctuary space and protected rear areas. This is a story that continues to develop, and Legal Lens USA will keep you updated as new information emerges. If this video helped you understand what is really happening in this conflict and why this single strike matters more than the headlines suggest, please share it with someone who needs to see this analysis, and drop a comment below. Do you think NATO has a credible answer to Russian hypersonic weapons right now? Let us know what you think, because this conversation matters, and your perspective matters. This is what the Kinzhal demonstrated in a strike that most media outlets either ignored or minimized. Military analysts across every defense ministry, every weapons development program, every strategic planning cell are now absorbing what this means. The defensive solutions are not ready yet. The timeline to deployment is measured in years, not months. And the question has been asked loudly through the destruction of a facility that was supposed to be invulnerable. The answers that will determine the future of this conflict and the security architecture of Eastern Europe are still being written.